It wasn't the usual kind of royal travel. No entourage, no formal dress, no cameras trailing the terminal. Just Prince Harry, bearded, solitary, anonymous beneath a baseball cap, boarding a private jet in the dead of night. No grand farewell, no scheduled return, only silence, shadowed by something far louder than scandal: fear. The departure wasn't scheduled. The press didn't even catch wind of it until the wheels were already in the air. For a man who had once weaponized media with surgical precision, this unannounced retreat felt like the opposite of branding. It felt like a flight from fire. But the fire wasn't in Britain. It was behind him, in California, in Montecito, in the place he and Meghan had once styled as their sanctuary, their kingdom reborn. That haven was now burning from the inside, and the one striking the match wasn't a tabloid editor or palace source. It was Tyler Perry, the same man who once threw open his multi-million-dollar Beverly Hills gates, offering not just privacy but loyalty. The man who became godfather to their child, who protected them when the firm turned its back. That man now holds the detonator. The reason for Harry's hasty return to the UK isn't family bonding. It isn't reconciliation. It's containment. Because behind Perry's quiet smile is a vault, one packed with 17 hours of raw, unfiltered recordings, conversations that weren't meant for the world, footage never meant to surface. But now they just might. This wasn't a homecoming. It was a retreat, not from his family, but from a collapsing illusion. The brand, the narrative, the tightly curated tale of liberation from the crown is unraveling. Not because of a palace smear campaign, but because of something far more dangerous: truth coming from within. And as Harry crossed the Atlantic alone, with nothing but damage control ahead, the world was left asking, what on earth is on those tapes? He wasn't a palace insider. He wasn't a royal courtier. He didn't wear crests or carry titles. But when the walls of Windsor crumbled around Harry and Meghan, Tyler Perry did what the crown never could. He opened his gates, not metaphorically, literally. His Beverly Hills estate became their fortress. Bulletproof security, blackout privacy, guest wings for Archie, a media safe zone curated to protect their post-royal rebranding. For Harry and Meghan, Perry wasn't just a friend. He was a guardian angel in Gucci, and they made sure the world knew him. Meghan name-checked him in interviews. Netflix featured him like a supporting character in their documentary arc. Social media posts practically canonized him. He wasn't just a host, he was a symbol of who had their back when everyone else turned theirs. But in Hollywood, symbols are fragile, and gratitude has a half-life. When Perry was suddenly hit with a staggering $260 million lawsuit from actor Derek Dixon, the ground began to shake. Not just for him, but for anyone tethered to him. Meghan, ever the media tactician, moved with breakneck speed. Mentions of Perry vanished from her feeds. Photos were archived. Even the public acknowledgement of him as Lilibet's godfather disappeared, like a red carpet being rolled back in reverse. It wasn't subtle, it was surgical. And it reeked, not of strategy, but of fear. But Perry is no ordinary Hollywood player. He didn't build a billion-dollar empire on blind trust. Buried deep in the paperwork Harry and Meghan signed when they moved in, according to insiders, was a clause few expected would ever come into play: the legal right to tell his side. And now he's invoking it. The man who once offered sanctuary now sits at the helm of a story that could dismantle their entire brand. Not because he turned vindictive, but because, as sources close to him say, he felt erased. And in the business of loyalty, there's nothing more dangerous than someone who gave you everything and then realized you thought they were disposable. At first it was a whisper, then a rumor, then a confirmation, soft, unofficial, but chillingly clear. There were tapes, not a few voice notes, not a PR recording from a media rehearsal. 17 hours, 17 unedited, time-stamped hours of raw, unscripted footage, captured inside the sanctuary they once called a safe house. They thought it was private. They thought Perry's home was a vault. In truth, it was a studio. Sources close to Perry say the recordings weren't secret surveillance. They were a byproduct of proximity, conversations on speakerphone, Strategy sessions echoing through open doors, nights where the cameras rolled as therapy turned into tactics. No one imagined those words would ever leave the room, but now they might define the fallout. In those recordings, Meghan allegedly discusses how to engineer sympathy, not how to tell the truth, but how to shape the perception of it. The pacing of her pauses, the order of emotional beats, whose name to drop and whose name to bury. PR not as defense, but as offense. Harry, meanwhile, is reportedly caught debating which family members to blame and which to frame as obstacles. At times, he sounds conflicted. At others, calculating. But the shock isn't in what was said. It's in how comfortable they were saying it. And Perry? He's on tape too, venting about Netflix deadlines, arguing over edits, expressing frustration that the couple's narrative was becoming more performance than authenticity. It wasn't just a documentary, it was, in his words, a production. The worst part? None of this was meant to be malicious. It was method, media strategy dressed as vulnerability, carefully curated moments posing as confession. But in the harsh light of playback, those moments lose their polish. Tears become tactics, silence becomes staging, and sincerity becomes a script. What Perry holds isn't just evidence, it's undoing, not of reputation, but of the very illusion that kept their empire afloat. 17 hours, 17 grenades, and no one knows when or where the first one will be thrown. There was a time when Harry and Meghan's names alone could move mountains in Hollywood. Deals didn't require pitches, just proximity. Their brand exhaled global relevance, a royal mystique wrapped in California charm. Platforms lined up, checkbooks open, eager to buy not just their story, but the aura they exuded. But in the wake of Perry's quiet rebellion, the wind shifted. Netflix, once the crown jewel in their media empire, has quietly revised the terms. The much-publicized $100 million deal, insiders now say the figure was largely inflated, more speculative than secured. Today, the number floats closer to $20 million, and even that hangs by a thread. Executives are frustrated. Viewer data isn't just disappointing, it's damning. The numbers don't lie. The audience has stopped watching. Spotify has already walked away. The partnership that was supposed to redefine podcasting collapsed under its own weight. Lemonada Media, which had planned to launch Meghan's next audio venture, has delayed the rollout indefinitely. Officially, it's about timing. Unofficially, it's about optics. No one wants to debut a new project under the cloud of an unfolding credibility crisis. Meanwhile, Archewell, their production company and philanthropic arm, is bleeding capital. Staff cuts have been swift and silent. Roles are dissolved, titles stripped, NDAs thickened. For those who remain, the mood is less creative hub, more bunker mentality. Even their most loyal collaborators are reportedly looking for exits, not because of budget concerns, but because the air around the brand has grown too thick to breathe. And then, quietly, donors began to pull back. Contributions to the Archewell Foundation have dropped nearly 30% in the last fiscal year. Fewer unrestricted grants, fewer speaking invites, fewer red carpet events. The glamorous post-royal fairy tale was supposed to sustain itself on media momentum and moral capital. But both are in short supply. And now, for the first time, the couple that once felt untouchable is facing something far worse than criticism: indifference. In Hollywood, the calls don't come when you're controversial. They stop when you are no longer valuable. And lately, the phones have been quiet. When the whispers about the tapes began circling, Meghan didn't issue a denial. She didn't tweet. She didn't take the stage. She simply disappeared Tyler Perry. One by one, the breadcrumbs vanished. Instagram photos, gone. Public mentions of him as Lilibet's godfather scrubbed. Podcast thank yous, edited. What had once been framed as a sacred bond was now treated like a blemish on a curated timeline. There was no drama, no confrontation, just digital erasure, as if history could be rewritten with a few quiet keystrokes. But in trying to delete Perry, Meghan did something far more revealing. She confirmed him, because the speed with which she moved, the surgical precision of the takedown, didn't look like distance. It looked like panic. And in the world of image management, panic speaks louder than press releases. Inside Archewell, the directive was swift. Limit exposure, reinforce messaging, tighten the circle. Staff were told to reroute any Perry-related queries to legal. Crisis PR firms were quietly re-engaged. Behind closed doors, strategy calls ran late into the night, less about managing the narrative, more about containing fallout. But it was too late. What they didn't seem to understand was that silence, when weaponized, can be deafening. Perry hadn't released the tapes. He hadn't said a word publicly. And yet, the fear inside the Sussex camp was growing by the hour, not because of what had been said, but because of what might be said. And the public noticed. Media outlets began connecting the dots. Entertainment journalists, once allies, started asking different questions. If Perry had truly betrayed them, why weren't they fighting back? If the recordings weren't damaging, why erase the man behind them? No official statement could match the impact of that silence. No rebuttal could outmaneuver the optics of Meghan, wiping Perry from her world the moment he became inconvenient. In trying to reclaim control, she revealed just how little of it remained. In the business of storytelling, deletion is not correction, it's confession. From a distance, Montecito still gleams. The mansion's stucco walls, the manicured rose garden, the echo of curated elegance in every drone shot aerial. But beneath the aesthetic, the math no longer works. The $1465 million estate that once symbolized post-royal independence has become a financial anchor. Property taxes alone approach $300,000 a year. Add in round-the-clock security, staff salaries, estate maintenance and luxury renovations, and the monthly burn rate rivals that of a minor studio executive. But unlike the studios, the income stream is no longer reliable. Spotify is gone. Netflix is wobbling. Archewell's media pipeline has slowed to a drip, and with each missed milestone, the safety net stretches thinner. Inside the foundation, donor confidence is eroding. Last year alone, unrestricted grant revenue fell by nearly a third. Not all donations are equal, and the kind that offers flexibility, the kind that funds operations rather than optics, is now the kind in short supply. When nonprofit cash flow tightens, the symptoms show fast. Prestige events get canceled. Speaking fees dry up. Invitations disappear. What remains is often symbolic, a chair at a round table, a line in a press release, but the actual power to shape the conversation vanishes with the dollars. Staff morale has cratered. Those not already laid off have been folded into increasingly vague roles. The once bustling compound, PR strategists, assistants, stylists, private chefs, now feels hollow. Conversations happen in whispers. Calendars are suddenly TBD. No one's sure who's next to go. Even Meghan's passion project, a lifestyle series meant to usher in a soft-focus rebranding, has faltered. Test screenings reportedly failed to resonate. Viewers called it flat. Critics labeled it performative. The cookware was flawless, the lighting divine. But something in the performance rang hollow. Too perfect, too polished, too far removed from the chaos quietly brewing outside the frame. Behind the curtain of glamour, the numbers no longer whisper. They scream. And in Hollywood, when the money dries up, so does the silence. The departure was quiet. No press, no farewell, just a name buried in private flight documents. Henry Windsor. Harry left California not as a royal, not as a rebel, but as a man in retreat. The decision wasn't ceremonial. It was crisis-born. After confirmation that Tyler Perry might release parts of the recordings, the Sussex inner circle snapped into emergency mode. Legal teams scrambled, PR advisors panicked, but damage control was already too late. So Harry flew. This wasn't a homecoming, it was a calculation. Back in Britain, amid old tensions and cold headlines, he hoped to find a firmer ground, or at least a pause. Not to reconcile, but to brace. Because he knows what's on those tapes, and he knows what they can do. Meghan stayed in California, holding position as best she could. But even inside their once glamorous mansion, the atmosphere had changed. It wasn't strategy anymore. It was containment. In London, the palace didn't respond. No welcome, no statement, just silence. The same silence Perry has held, and the same silence that now terrifies them both. Harry, once the architect of his own breakaway, now walks back through the ashes. Not for forgiveness, not for closure, but because he no longer controls the narrative. And he knows it. The mansion in Montecito remains, but the silence inside speaks louder than any headline. Meghan stays behind, managing what's left. Not of a brand, but of a narrative no longer hers to shape. Tyler Perry hasn't said much. He hasn't needed to. Just the knowledge that he could speak has shifted everything. It's not what's been leaked. It's what remains unheard. That thread alone now defines their future. Once Harry and Meghan controlled the lens. Every word, every tear, every shot was deliberate. But what they built wasn't trust, it was theater. And theater only works when the audience believes. Now someone else holds the footage, someone they tried to erase. And he's chosen silence not out of mercy, but timing, a different kind of power. Harry fled not toward reconciliation, but away from exposure. Meghan is left facing a truth she can't reframe. The story isn't theirs anymore. Because when perception was their greatest currency, losing control didn't just tarnish their image, it bankrupted it. And this time, there's no script left to edit.